So if you're buying new construction in the Inland Empire, say Ontario Ranch, Riverside, or maybe out in Orange County at the Great Park in Irvine, and you've been searching for what to expect at the builder's sales office, or maybe whether the incentive they're advertising is actually the best deal available, well, this is the video you were looking for. Because every builder sales office in Southern California is running the same 3-move playbook on you. And it's the same structure, the same sequence, maybe slightly different language depending on the community. And the gap between buyers who see it coming and buyers who don't isn't abstract. It can be like $30,000. In some transactions, it's more. So I'm going to walk you through each move, show you exactly why it works, and give you the specific questions that neutralize it. So I am Steve Enchin. I specialize in new construction across Southern California, and I've sat across the table from these sales reps, not as a casual buyer, but as the agent representing new construction home buyers just like you. So right now in 2026, with builder incentive packages running well into the 5 figures, depending on the community, understanding what's actually on the table before you sign is the difference between getting the deal they designed for you and getting the deal that was actually negotiated for you. So first, the first number is a trap. The first move happens before you've asked a single question about the home, before you've walked the model, before you know the square footage or the lot premiums. The sales rep establishes a number. Sometimes it's a pricing map on the wall, like a visual of the community with price ranges next to each lot. They don't say, here's what it costs, but they walk you to it. They let you absorb it. So within 30 seconds, you've internalized the price range as the baseline reality of that community. And every number you encounter after that gets measured against it. Sometimes it's more direct. For example, just so you have some context, homes in this phase are starting from the mid-8s. One sentence. And from that moment, your brain is doing math relative to the mid-8s. And that's called anchoring. The first number you encounter disproportionately shapes every number you evaluate after it. And that's not because you're unsophisticated, because that's how human cognition works under uncertainty. The anchor doesn't have to be accurate, it just has to be first. And what makes the builder version particularly effective? The anchor is never presented as a sales number, it's presented as helpful orientation. The rep is doing you a favor so you don't waste time on something outside your range. And that framing makes it feel like information. The effect is identical to influence. And what I see consistently, whether it's Ontario Ranch, Riverside, or down in the Great Park, the anchor is set at the top of the range or framed around the most premium product before any conversation about what you're actually looking for. So even when the rep eventually walks you down to a lower price point, that original anchor has already done its work. The lower number now feels like a discount relative to the anchor, rather than what it actually is, which is the market value of what you're considering. Now, next, the urgency is engineered. In every buyer conversation I've been a part of, urgency is present, every single one. But it's rarely the clumsy pressure you'd expect. It's not like a car salesman. It's structural. It's built into the incentive framework in ways that feel less like sales pressure and more like the natural mechanics of how builder programs work. So here's the most common pattern. The rep introduces an incentive window tied to a contract signing deadline. We're currently offering up to $40,000 in flex incentives if you contract before the end of the month. The urgency isn't stated as pressure, it's framed as an opportunity that just happens to have a natural expiration date. The psychological mechanism is loss aversion. You're not being pressured to buy something. You're being shown something you'll lose if you don't act. Those feel like completely different experiences, even though they're structurally the same situation. And in other cases, urgency is built around inventory. For example, a site map up on the wall with lots marked sold, reserved, and available. And the available lots are, well, notably few, especially in the section that you just expressed interest in. Whether that map reflects real-time inventory or is strategically curated, you have no way of knowing in the room. So in a market like Ontario Ranch or down in Great Park, where phases in the really popular communities generally do sell through, the fear of missing out feels completely justified, which is exactly what makes it so effective. So here's the nuance. Some of that urgency is real. Incentive programs do expire. Lot inventory does get sold. So the manipulation isn't in inventing urgency from nothing, it's in presenting every form of urgency as equally credible, equally immediate, regardless of whether it's real or manufactured. So let me make this concrete with a real buyer. I worked with a client, very analytical, very disciplined on paper, but he needed the deal to feel like a win. So we worked together for a long time, and every option I brought was anchored to real closed transaction data, real market comparables, but it never felt like enough. Eventually, he went directly to a builder in Riverside on his own, and that's exactly where the Playbook got him. Inflated starting point, an engineered discount, perfectly packaged to make him feel like he beat the system. But he didn't out-negotiate anyone. He bought into a story, and the numbers supported the story just enough to feel legitimate. 40% off an inflated price feels like a bigger win than 15% off reality. And that's the design. The moment you step away from actual closed transaction data as your benchmark, you are exactly who this playbook was built for. Now, next, the advertised incentive is the floor and not the ceiling. So this is the third move, and it's the most subtle because it's not about what the builder does, it's about what they don't do. And here's what happens when a buyer walks in without experienced representation. The rep presents the advertised incentive package and the buyer assumes that's the deal. They might push back a little bit on price, that's very typical, but then they're told that the base price is set by corporate and you got to accept the advertised incentive as the full extent of what's possible. And then they feel like they got the deal because they got what was being offered. The advertised incentive is the floor. It's what the builder is willing to give every buyer who walks through the door. It's not the limit of what's negotiable. So design center credits beyond the standard allowance, solar included at the builder's cost, upgraded appliance packages, a lot premium reduction, and extended rate lock. These are not on the menu the rep is going to walk you through. They come from knowing where the builder has margin, understanding what might have been done in other transactions, and being experienced enough to ask for things the buyer sitting in this model home yesterday never thought to ask for. So you remember that $30,000 figure from the top of the video? Here's what that actually might look like in practice. So I had a buyer in the Inland Empire. The builder was advertising that $30,000 in flex incentives. That's standard. Every buyer walking in was getting offered the same number. But we ended up with a deal that included meaningful design center credits on top of that flex cash, plus solar fully paid by the builder. And none of that was on the flyer. None of it was offered proactively. It was there because we knew to push for it on this specific home, and we knew where the flexibility was. So the buyer who accepts the advertised package isn't getting ripped off. They're getting exactly what the builder wants to give them. The question is whether that's the same thing as what was actually available. And in my experience, it almost never is. So here's what you need to do. You need to get me to pull comparables before you visit. In California, closed sale prices on new construction do not hit the public record until the property appears on the tax roll. And that can lag the actual transaction by several months. So by the time that data is publicly available, market conditions may have already shifted, and you still can't tell what the buyer selected at the design center. So what looks like a $900,000 closing price could include $120,000 in upgrades or none at all. So while we don't have access to MLS closed transaction data in new construction, we do want to try to do some research with the builder to see what the typical prices have been recently in that or the previous phase. So we want to do that briefing before we walk into the model, not afterwards. And that way, when the anchor lands, and it will, you already know whether it has any relationship to what homes in the community are actually closing for. And that's what I do before we go out to visit the sales center. Now next, we want to test the urgency with 3 specific questions. First, is this incentive available to all buyers right now, or is it specific to this conversation right now? How many homes have been sold in this section or this phase release in the last 60 days? And what happened to the buyers who missed the last incentive deadline? Almost always, there's another program that followed immediately after. So that answer alone reframes the urgency entirely. None of this means that you should move slowly when speed is generally warranted, but your timeline should be driven by your own read of the market, not really by the rhythm of the presentation that's designed to kind of compress your decision window with urgency. And then finally, know what's been negotiated before we sit down. We don't ask the sales rep what's been included in past transactions because they're not going to tell us. And even if they do, they're not going to volunteer the concessions that went beyond the standard package. So the person who knows what's actually been done in the community is an agent like myself who has been working in these transactions. So before you visit, you want to ask me directly, in recent deals at this builder and in this community, what have you seen that may have come through beyond the advertised incentive? Are they open to design center credits, lot premium adjustments, builder paid upgrades? So that's the baseline for our negotiation. And that way you're not walking in blind, hoping the sales rep offers you something, because they're not, but you are walking in already knowing what the ceiling potentially looks like. And the buyers who do this well slow down at exactly the moments that the process is designed to speed up. So when urgency is introduced, we start asking questions instead of reacting. So when a concession lands, we can measure it against our own position, not the previous number. When an anchor drops, we acknowledge it and then return to the data that we already have. So if you're looking at new construction right now in Ontario Ranch or Riverside, Great Park and Irvine, text me the community name and where you are in the process, whether you're actively evaluating a builder or community or just starting to think through what the different options are. And I can tell you what the incentive situation actually looks like on the specific community and phase that you're considering. So I hope this information has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next video.